Justin. Welcome back to iiiiiivvivii TV. I am the owner of iiiiiivvivii Life Coaching in Orlando, Florida. And in this video, we're gonna learn about how to live in a peak state. So to start off, we're gonna look at what do I mean by state? What is that? And then is this for you? Does it apply to you? Who does this apply to? Why does it matter? Why should you care? What are the good things that can happen if you do learn to show up in a peak state? And then more importantly, maybe is what is the price that you would pay or maybe are paying right now to not learn to do this and to not show up. So let's get started. All right, so what do I mean by state? State is the level of focus, of energy, of vibrancy that you're showing up in the world with day to day and moment to moment. So for example, if you think of Michael Jordan, Game 7, he shows up, his state is good, he's ready to execute, he goes out there, he plays well, wins a championship, right? Good state, good result. Versus if you think of the athletes who sort of go out there, they're mentally checked out, you can tell they're not ready to play, they go out, they don't play well, they lose, right? So crappy state, crappy results. And so our state is basically how we're showing up in the world day to day, moment to moment, business and career side and personal life side. Are we showing up with all of ourselves or not? And then I rate that with people on a spectrum of 1 to 10. So when I first meet them, I ask them, hey, where would you rate yourself, how you're showing up in the world, scale of 1 to 10, business and personal. So you probably should have something to write with as you're watching this because you can really follow along and do these activities with me. So first you want to rate your state on a scale of 1 to 10, right? So you have that number. So next, let's talk about who does this matter for, right? Does this matter for you? Should you be watching this video? Is this video gonna help you? How do you know it's gonna help you? Why should you care, right? So think of state like this. I really like drawing pictures because it really helps you to kind of understand what's going on. So I'm gonna be drawing a lot of pictures here. Before I erase stuff, I'll let you know that I'm about to erase everything. So you may wanna take screenshots of things. That way you have something and you can look back at these things, right? So I'll let you know when I'm gonna erase stuff. So let's say that lovely stick figure is you. Let's say that's a little bar of the amount of energy you're showing up in the world with. And let's say that's supposed to be a 3. Let's say you're showing up in the world at about a 3, right? This is easy for us to understand. So we can see why that would be a problem, right? Like, I like to draw it for people another way. So look at this. So let's say okay, so I tell my clients that our results in life are always going to be in direct proportion to our state, right? So let's say that you rated yourself a 3. You're like, hey Justin, on a scale of 1 to 10, business and personal, in my life, I think I'm showing up in the world at around a 3. So that would be somewhere around here, right? So you can think of this as the state you're in. Let's say state over here, right? And then over here as your results, right? Results. So your state is going to be in direct proportion to your results, or at least it's going to be extremely highly correlated. What does that mean? It means if your state is a 1, your results are probably not going to be a 10. It's just probably not going to happen. Life doesn't work that way, right? There's a certain amount of energy that we need to get this. So if you're showing up in the world at a 1, it's going to be very highly correlated to 1 level results. Showing up at a 5 is going to be highly correlated to sort of medium level results. You're showing up really, really well, business and personal. You're all of yourself in the moment, present, executing with all of yourself, whatever it is that needs to be done. It's highly probable that your results are more going to correlate to that number up there, right? And so this is you, and you're showing up in the world in some kind of way, let's say 3. So you can see this is a problem, right? There's energy you're not showing up with. So that would put you somewhere here. So that would put your results somewhere here. But you want your results to be somewhere here, and you see that there is a disconnect, right? And so what we want to do is we want to try to bridge that gap. The first thing we want to do, no matter where we're at in our life or how things are going, is we want to learn to do this, right? Because you could have all the goals and all the plans in the world, but if your state is not good, guys, then you're not going to have any energy to do anything, right? We have to have energy to do things, and so that's what this is. And so that sort of answers the question, what is state? Now, who is this for? Is this for you? Why does it matter, right? So this is really for anyone, and I do mean that in the broadest sense of things, right? So could be for business owners, it could be for people on 100% commission, could be a person in any type of job, could be for athletes, could be for very young people that are just kind of growing up and figuring out life, right? It could be anything. So why does this matter? Let's say business and personal. Why does this matter in all these different areas of our lives, right? So I'll give a couple examples so you can see that whoever you are that's watching this video right now, whether you just want to make more money or you want your business life to be better, you want to sell more, you want your personal life to be better, or some combination, or whatever you're here for, why ever you're watching this video, just to give a couple quick examples of why this matters, right? So let's say this is you, right? State is a 3, results are 3. So now let's say that, let's take a personal life example. Let's say that you're married, right? Let's say you're a man and you're married, man or woman, whatever, and you go home to your spouse and your state is a 3. And let's say that day after day after day, you're showing up for your spouse at a 3. If you're showing up for your spouse at a 3, then you're not gonna have this level of relationship with your spouse, right? It's just not gonna happen. Now, obviously there's lots of factors in what your relationship with your spouse would be like, but this is a good place to start. A good place to start is, are you showing up with all of yourself in the moment, bringing all of yourself to what you're doing, ready to do a great job at whatever that is, and you're bringing energy to the table, right? If you're showing up for your boyfriend or girlfriend, right? Your romantic partner, or for dating if you're single, you go on a first date, your state sucks, that other person is probably not gonna be too excited to hang out with you anymore, right? Showing up for your children, showing up for your friendships, showing up to a sales meeting, showing up for your employees, right? Showing up for a big business meeting, you know, whatever it is, whenever this is off, results suffer. Results suffer, they have to, right? Because our states are gonna be highly, highly correlated, if not directly correlated to our state. We have to have a certain amount of energy to get up here. So whatever it is you're wanting to do, guys, this really, really matters. You know, it's often said that, I forget who says this quote, but like the difference between success and failure is so thin that it's hard to tell where one stops and the other begins, meaning very little, right? I don't know if you guys ever saw I think it was the first Fast and the Furious movie. I think there's like 15 now. I don't know how many there are. I haven't seen them all. But Dominic, I think is his name, Vin Diesel, the bald one, he talks about, you know, it doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile, winning's winning. So what that means, I think, is a lot of times in life, the difference between us getting to what we want and not, let's say win and loss, right? Win, we get what we want, loss, we didn't. So it could be in business, they either signed the contract or they didn't, right? In sports, we either won or we didn't. In competition, we either placed or we didn't, right? The girl or guy either went out with us or they didn't. We either married the girl or guy or we didn't, right? So there's a lot of things in life that are sort of, they either happened or they didn't. And a lot of times they're happening by very, very small margins. So there's lots of things we can do to try to stack the odds in our favor so that we do well with those things and hopefully get more on the winning side, less on the losing side. But this is one of the things we can do, right? So if your state is a 3, whether you're a student or a business owner, or 100% commission person, or you're just wanting your relationships and things in your personal life to be better, or whatever it is, you can imagine that if you're showing up as a 3 to all those things, and if we know that the difference between winning and losing is very small, then you better believe that this is going to affect it, and that it's going to be highly likely that you're not going to get this version of what you want, right? So this would probably be a good time to take a screenshot of everything. I know this is a little bit crazy, but this up here says state, this says business and personal, 1 to 10. This was our little version of you. This was your state being a 3. This was different levels of your state, right? So 1, 5, 10, and then results 1, 5, 10, right? That they're highly correlated. So that's what all this is. I would recommend taking a screenshot right now. Get out of the way so you can see it. And now I'm gonna erase this, and we're going to move on to, okay, so now probably that you're watching this and you're seeing, yes, okay, this matters to me. I'm one of those things that Justin describes, right? Because really we all are, we're all somewhere in there. This matters for all of us. Whatever life we're wanting to create, we're gonna have to have energy to do that, right? And so this matters for all of us. Now we're going to get into, okay, well, how do we go about increasing our state, right? So if we're at a 3, and we want to be up at a 10, how do we go about doing that, right? Methodically, in a way that ideally can always work. So no matter who we are, no matter what we're going for, this is always the place to start. There's a passage I've been referring to a lot in the Bible in the past 3 years of my own life about being faithful in the small things and you'll be given larger things, right? So a lot of times when we don't have the larger things in our lives that we want, it's because we're not doing a good enough job with right in front of us, so the basics, right? And so learning to show up in the world with energy is the small things. It's the basics. It's the things that we have to learn how to do first. And when we do a good job with that thing, then we can be given more, all right? So I'm gonna erase this now, final chance to take your screenshot. And we're gonna get into, okay, well, how do we go about doing this? Okay, good. So now that we got that erased, start from the beginning. This is you. Once again, I know I missed my calling as an artist. That's probably what you're thinking. If life coaching ends up not working out for me for some reason, at least I've got a future in that. So we want to start with the most basic things. And I was thinking a lot about when I first started studying people who are successful and building the lives they wanted, what was it that they were all doing? What is it that's the most basic stuff that we should be faithful in, that all those people are always doing, they're always blocking out time for it, that really massively impact their state? So I started to gather these things that were a list that I felt were really, really important to how we show up in the world. And you're gonna wanna be taking notes again, or you can screenshot or both, but this is gonna be interactive, so you're gonna be rating yourself on these things, okay? So the first 3 basics are eating, sleeping, and working out. Eating, sleeping, and working out, okay? So why do these matter? Why do these matter? Why do I have these here? If we don't eat, we're screwed, right? We have no energy, we have to eat, human beings have to eat, nutrition affects us, right? It's something we have to have. If it's not there, we're in big trouble. It's the most basic things. A lot of us are not doing very well in these basic things, but if we're not doing well in these small basic things, we really probably can't be handling more, and typically, we could be doing better in these things. So let's start with eating. So eating, I want you guys to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 of your eating. So 1 would be like, or let's say 10 would be that you eat whatever amount of calories, per day is probably right for your body, much lower in sugar, lower in like lots of fats and things like that. You're eating healthy right amount for you, consistently, the vast majority of the time. And then 1 would be like you're eating fast food multiple times a day, tons of sugar, tons of fat, just like really bad, super high carbs, whatever diet. I'm not a nutritionist, but these are just some of like the basics that, we can think about. So I want you to rate yourself, you're eating a scale of 1 to 10. So we'll do a little example here, but really it's best if you guys follow along and put what it is for you. But let's just say that, and think over the past like 6 months or 6 to 12 months. So it's like the recent past, right? If you rate yourself today or this past week, that might be a little confusing compared to what you would rate yourself over the past 6 to 12 months, which would be kind of like the recent past of how you're doing. So overall, rate your eating, scale of 1 to 10. 10 is how I described, very well, consistently, vast majority of time. 1, terrible. This isn't an exact science, but when we can measure things, it can help us. Okay? Sleeping. So guys, we have to sleep, right? We know there's a lot of studies that, when you don't sleep, you can get a number of illnesses, like physical, psychological. There's even been studies of people kind of dying of sleep deprivation because their whole system sort of shuts down after a certain amount of being forced to stay awake. So sleeping is something everybody does, right? So all high-performing people, they eat, right? They take care of themselves, and they sleep. Most millionaires sleep an average of 7 to 8 hours a night. So it's like, there's a lot of people that say, oh, Justin, I don't have time to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. It's like, well, if all of these people, these millionaires, if they're sleeping an average of 7 to 8 hours a night, probably closer to 8, Jeff Bezos, right? He sleeps 8 hours a night. This guy's gotta be one of the busiest, having the most responsibility people on the planet, right? That was not good English, but one of the people with the most on his plate in the planet. So if there's anybody that you would think would not have the time to be sleeping 8 hours a night. You would think it'd be someone like him. And there are outliers, right? There are some people that sleep a little less. Elon Musk admits he sleeps 6 hours a night, which is a little less, but he doesn't go beyond that because he finds it affects him too much. But for the most part, you see people in the 7 to 8 hour range for the higher performing people, the millionaires, people like this, right? And so I learned that and I thought, okay, well, if they're so busy, yet they have time to do that, and if they're all doing that, then there must be something to that, and that must matter. And obviously there's a lot of health research that this matters as well, right? So we have to sleep. This is part of the success formula, right? We've got to eat, we've got to sleep. When we don't do those things, we suffer, we don't show up the way we could, we pay a major price. And you know, think about it, guys. If these highly successful people, if they thought, you know, that's a big commitment, 33% of your life, right, is spent asleep, basically 8 hours. And so if they thought they could take some more of that time and allocate it somewhere else, they would do it. But they obviously don't think that because they're voting with their actions and they're sleeping. So they must think that that sleeping is very valuable, that their return on investment, right, in their business and personal life is so high that they have to protect that in sleep. And that's good for us to know, right? That means we should probably be doing the same thing. So I want you to rate your sleeping scale of 1 to 10. So 10 would be, let's say, 7 to 8 hours a night. Very, very consistently going to bed at a semi-reasonable time, maybe before 12 or 1 or whatever. And let's say sleeping through the night, feeling rested in the morning, these kinds of things, right? Just good sleep. And then let's say 1 would be, you know, going to sleep at all types of crazy hours, maybe going to sleep at, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the morning. Now some people work overnights and that's tricky, but that's really, really not good for your health. But try to rate yourself the best you can. 1 would also be like not sleeping through the night at all, tossing and turning, waking up, not rested at all. So you want to rate your sleep here. So let's just say this person's eating is a 3, and let's say this person's sleep is a 4, right? So we're beginning to get an idea of this person. Maybe your numbers are different. Follow along and write down your own numbers. Again, this is the past 6 to 12 months. How you feel you've been doing with your sleeping, okay? Working out. All successful people, right? Millionaires, billionaires, athletes, obviously, are working out, right? I think the average is like 5 to 6 times a week that they do, right? Or like 5 to 6 hours a week, I think is an equivalent. So maybe don't quote me, but it's somewhere around there that most of them do. Some a little less, some much more. So this matters, right? This is another thing that these very successful people are all blocking out this time and saying, this thing that I'm doing is giving me such a high return that it has to be done. It's one of the basics. It's got to be done for me to show up like I want to and get where I want to be. This is something I got to do. So once again, we think, oh, I don't have time to work out. You don't know my schedule. It's like, well, yeah, you know, I understand. That's true. I don't know your schedule. But what I do know is if all those people are blocking it, then we should probably block it too. Eating, sleeping, working out. These are our first 3 basics. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 if you're working out. So 10 would be maybe 5, 6 plus times per week on average, consistently. You know, having great workouts, feeling good, feeling strong, healthy. And 1 would be not going at all, right? Don't remember the last time you went, or almost never do any form of exercise or physical activity. You're just very sedentary and whatever, right? So let's say this person, if they're eating and sleeping is not good, I'm gonna guess their working out's not so good. So let's say that person's a 4, right? Eating, sleeping, working out. Now these next 2 are not quite as obvious as these first 3, but I'm gonna explain them and I think they really, really do matter. So you wanna weight these very, very heavily. If we're not doing a good job at these, I almost guarantee you your state is not good. Your state could be good, but it's tough. It's tough to show up to the degree that we really want to when this stuff is bad. It's possible, but it's tough, especially when it's consistently bad, then it's really hard to show up like that. So, okay, we've got clean home, clean car. So the easiest way to understand these guys, and these are a little less obvious, right? But think about when your home is a mess, right? We all know the feeling, and maybe your home's a mess right now, right? But if it's not right now, it probably was semi-recently. So think of when your home is a mess and you sort of feel like kind of gross in your home, right? And you're sort of like mentally looking at everything and you don't really feel good about it. And you're almost trying to like sort stuff out in your mind. Like this needs to go over here, that needs to go over there. And it's tough, right? So, but then imagine the feeling where you clean your home and you just feel so good, right? And like you feel sort of more focused and grounded and poised and centered and like, okay, I'm ready to sort of go out in the world and do what I need to do. Or maybe you're working from home and you clean your home and you're like, okay, I'm ready to get into this meeting or start this project, right? So it's easy to notice the importance of this when it's not there. You might be like, oh, clean home, clean car, you know, what does that have to do with anything? But when your home goes from really dirty to really clean, you notice, right? You notice you feel different, you notice you show up different. It's something simple, it's a basic thing we can do to show up better, right? And if we're not doing it, it's probably affecting us at least a little bit. So, whoops. So, scale of 1 to 10, clean home. 10, very clean, vast majority of the time, aired out, smells good, looks good, you feel great in your home. 1, your home is disgusting, it's terrible, it smells terrible, it looks terrible, you feel gross in your home, whatever, right? So past 6 to 12 months, vast majority of the time, you know, if you had to put a number on it, let's say this person does a little better at that. Say this person is a 7, but rate yourself whatever your numbers are. Clean car, same concept as the clean home, right? So you might think, oh, what does, you know, clean car have to do with anything? But when your car looks like shit, right? And you know that feeling, we're sort of in your car and you almost feel embarrassed that that's your car and you feel terrible and you feel gross. And then you clean it and you feel like you kind of just got a new car and you're kind of, you know, sitting up a little straighter or a little more lean back, I guess. But you're in your car in a way where you just feel better. You know, you feel good, you feel better. It affects the way you show up. So, you know, scale of 1 to 10, 10, clean, looks great, vast majority of the time. 1 looks terrible, vast majority of the time, right? Like McDonald's garbage all over your car and your car smells bad and there's shit everywhere and, you know, whatever. Now I know some people have kids and so my clients would say, oh, but I have kids, and I have pets and I have dogs. I understand clean home, clean car is tough, right? But just do the best you can to rate these, how you feel you do with this. Let's say this person's car is pretty clean. Next basics. So make sure you rate yourself scale of 1 to 10. In case you're wondering, yes, I'm 100% aware that my handwriting is terrible, and this is my very good handwriting. So you can imagine my bad handwriting. But yes, grooming and self-presentation is what this says. So this is another one of those things that you can kind of really notice it when it's not there and then it changes, right? So maybe if you really need a haircut, you need to shave, or, you know, you need to brush your teeth, you need to shower, you're feeling gross. Like we all know that feeling of just sort of not being well groomed and you feel kind of gross. Like you don't want to go out and present yourself in the world and you're sort of self-conscious. Like if you do go out in the world like that, you're sort of hoping, you know, nobody looks at you or whatever. And this affects us, right? And then we can notice like, okay, we feel that way. And then maybe we shower and get the haircut and shave and put on some nicer clothes and, you know, put on some cologne or perfume or whatever, you know, dress in a way we're presenting ourselves well. And we instantly feel 1,000,000 times better, right? We can see this shift, and it's a shift that impacts our state. It affects how we show up. Also, you can usually see, you know, people who are successful, let's say, you know, if they're making a certain amount of money, which is not the only form of success, obviously, but in any way that they're successful in their life, you know, they're taking themselves seriously and the life that they're going after that they desire to have, they take that seriously. These people that we admire, their grooming and self-presentation is usually good, right? When someone's sort of really on point or really chasing after a life that excites them, they tend to not show up in the world in a really gross way, right? They're sort of being faithful in these basic things. And this is another one of those basic things where It helps us to believe we are who we say we are. We're going out there, putting our best foot forward, and we're ready to execute with all of ourselves to the best of our ability with whatever it is that we're doing, right? So rate yourself scale of 1 to 10. 10 would be, really on point, vast majority of the time. Hair, beard, obviously for women, maybe not, right? But, whatever your gender is and however, how you groom yourself, I guess you could say, that your grooming is on point, right? Your grooming, your self-presentation. So this could include hair, face, could include like jewelry or necklace or clothing, perfume, cologne, however your overall presentation of yourself. When we do a good job on this, we tend to feel a lot better. When we don't, we tend not to. It tends to have an impact on our state, so it matters. So it's one of our basics. And again, this is being faithful in the small things, right? Faithful in the small things, grooming ourselves. Maybe we'll be ready for some bigger things in life, right? But we got to do the small things first. And if we're not doing the small things, then those need some of our attention, which is what we're doing now. Okay? So rate your grooming and self-presentation on a scale of 1 to 10. Body language. In case you can't read my handwriting, once again, this is my good handwriting. Body language. So why do I have this here, and what does that mean, and why should you care, and how can you use this? So I'm thinking of doing like a really, really big video all on body language to really share everything I've learned. Not that I know everything, obviously, but it's something I've studied a lot. It's helped me a ton in the way I present myself, in the way I'm able to read others. It's helped me a massive amount in sales and persuasion in business. It's helped me in my personal life, both like, friendship-wise or dating-wise, being able to understand what people are thinking around me so that I can adjust myself, right? Are they responding to me positively, negatively, or whatever? But for our purposes here, we're just talking about body language in terms of what it means with our state. There's a lot of research that shows that the fastest way to change the way you're thinking and feeling is to change the way you move, right? So all of these basics, they're good. They're all helpful. We need them all. We should be faithful in them all. But we can't always do them all at any given moment, right? So let's say your state is bad in the moment. You don't always have time to go eat and then sleep and then work out and then clean your home and then clean your car and then grooming and self-presentation, right? And go get your hair cut and blah, blah, blah. You don't always have time to do all that stuff. So yes, they're important, but they're limited in a way, right? So this is something that we can always use in the moment, and that's very, very helpful. Wherever you are, whatever you're going into, wherever you are or whatever you're going into, let's say you're going into a meeting, or you're going in to see your wife, or you're going in to spend time with your kids, or whatever it is, you can sort of immediately, adjust yourself and immediately be ready. So this is very helpful, and I always do this little activity with my clients, and this is not something I made up. It's from Tony Robbins, but it's so valuable that I always share it because it really spoke to me, and it's a great demonstration of this working and mattering in real time in this tiny little activity. So assuming you're not listening to this in your car, right? Because you don't want to do this if you're in your car. If you're in your car, you can wait till you get home, but you can still keep watching the video. But let's say if you're at home, or if you can, I want you to stand up, right? And I know I have the camera like this, but you can still see my body a little bit. But what I want you to do first is I want you to sort of like hunch over, right? I'm gonna go a little closer to the camera. Again, you can't see my whole body, but I'm gonna explain for you exactly what you should do, and you guys can do this, and it's really crazy. I know you might be like, oh, Justin, I don't wanna follow this. This is stupid, but just work with me for a second, because you will see the difference, and you'll be like, whoa, yeah, this matters. That was cool. So kind of hunch over, like roll your shoulders over, and you can kind of like roll your head over. So you should look kind of like weak, right? And bend at your knees, right? So I'm still gonna stay in the camera so you can still hear me and see me, but bend at your knees. You could even cross your legs, right? So they're sort of pushing against each other. And you could maybe like put your arm on your tricep, your right arm, let's say, on your left tricep, and hunch over a little more, bend down a little more, and you kind of press your legs tightly against yourself and have sort of like a, like a sad face, right? And I want you guys to hold that position, and I want you to be confident. Be confident, be confident, be confident, be confident, be confident, be confident, be confident. Okay, you can stop, you can stand straight up. So you should notice that when you do that, it feels nearly impossible to be confident because you're holding your body in this particular way that it's like, shit, like I can't. It's like not possible because there's such a high correlation, such a high relationship between the way we're holding our body and the way that we feel and are showing up in the world. So now what I want you to do, this will be a little bit easier to see with the video, is I want you to stand up straight and kind of pretend like there's a string from the top of your head to the ceiling. And there's like a cape coming off you, kind of like royalty, like a king. And your hands at your sides, maybe 2 or 3 inches off the sides of your legs. And your feet sort of firmly planted in the ground, down into the ground, maybe slightly more than shoulder width apart. And put like a big smile. And I want you to hold that feeling. So you should be sort of looking like that, right? And so hold that with the smile, bear with me. And I want you to be depressed. Be depressed, be depressed, be depressed, be depressed, be depressed, be depressed. Okay, you can stop. So you should notice that it feels nearly impossible to be depressed in that feeling, right? Because you're holding your body in a certain way and it just doesn't feel possible, right? So when I first did this activity, when I first heard it and I followed along and Tony Robbins was on the video and I was sort of doing this and I thought that was really interesting. I was like, so I can't be confident with my body like that and I can't be depressed with my body like that, roughly speaking, right? There's something interesting I learned the other day. So serotonin is the chemical in our body that we try to treat when someone has depression. But the symptoms of depression are actually the same symptoms of being at the bottom of a dominance hierarchy, right? So maybe you're not employed, your health is terrible, you're not very smart, you don't have any access to mating opportunities, right? Whatever it is. So the same experience of depression and being down at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy, they're the same feeling. And serotonin, that same chemical that regulates both those things, is regulated by the way that we move our body. So when you see people who are higher up in society, they're usually taking up more space because they're higher up on the dominance hierarchy and they have more serotonin. And because they have more serotonin, that also governs the way that they're moving, and they're moving bigger, right? So the way that we're moving has an implication of where we are in that dominance hierarchy. But luckily for us, wherever you are in that dominance hierarchy, right? Maybe you're at the top of whatever you're doing or maybe not. We can edit how we're moving and we can sort of try to put that in our favor. And so you want to start to be aware of your body language, right? So this is not going to be a full body language course, but for example, a lot of people are always crossing their arms. That's not good, guys. There's almost never a time where crossing your arms is good unless you want to deliberately be confrontational. Maybe you're like really wanting to show somebody, you're not messing around or whatever, or you want to fight or whatever. So yes, you could do it sometimes, but it's never positive. It's almost never something that's going to help you, and people do it all the time, and it's highly negative, and it's putting a barrier between you and others, and it 99.5% of the time is going to hurt you and hurt that other person too, and you're going to be a lot less likely to get what you want. So anyway, but from a state standpoint, how we're showing up in the world, you guys can start to be aware of your body language. How are you moving, right? Are you kind of like moving around like this and like this and like this, and anything that's across, usually bad, disappearing your hands behind your back, anything that's hunched over, anything that's sort of closed in versus more open. So I want you guys to start to be aware of your body language. How are you moving, right? And to sort of adjust your body language. So when you catch yourself going like this, like, oh, uncross your arms. You catch yourself again, oh, uncross your arms. And you do this, right? And you start to notice and you say, okay, I'm gonna fix this. And you're gonna notice it as you start to move differently, as you start to physically carry your body differently in the world, you will feel differently, you will show up differently. It really makes an enormous difference, and it's something that can happen quickly, right? You could be, like I said, going into a business meeting or going into a date with your wife or husband or boyfriend or girlfriend or first date or whatever, or hanging out with friends, and you wanna sort of be able to snap into that place of like, okay, I'm ready, right? And the fastest way that you can do that is, adjust your body language. Like, okay, I'm ready to go, right? So that was a little longer explanation, but I want you to try to rate your body language on a scale of 1 to 10. And I know that you're probably not very aware of that right now, unless you read all these books also, which most people don't. But if you had to guess, scale of 1 to 10, 10 is, you know, really, really good, strong, open, positive, approachable, confident, body language, you know, vast majority of the time. 1, sort of like in a constant state of doing that. So do the best you can. Let's say this person's grooming and self-presentation, I'm gonna say it's like a 4, and their body language, I'm gonna say it's like a 3, right? So now you should have all of these numbers, right? And these are our basics. These are the first places that I always look with someone whenever I meet them, the first 30 days. Sometimes they get this stuff faster, maybe it's 3 weeks instead of 4, but the first 3 to 4 weeks, and this is always where we start. Everything that we're doing in this video is everything I do with my clients in the first 30 days. So everything's gonna be in there for you guys. It'll be detailed enough. You can do all this without me if you would like to. So we've got eating, sleeping, working out, clean home, clean car, grooming, self-presentation, body language, right? So now what I have my clients do is add all these up. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 categories. Yes, I know that's a terrible 8. So there's 8 categories. So let's say if we added these up, obviously my phone and camera is recording here, but I can add them up. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Right? So this person got 32 points out of 8 categories total. So you can add up yours. So add up your each of these categories, and that number you're gonna put here, and then you're gonna divide that by 8 because there's 8 categories. So 8 divided by 32, 8, 16, 24, 8, 16, 24, 32. Oh, okay. 8, 16, 24, 32. Yeah. Yeah, I think my math is right. That's a little embarrassing if it's not, but let's go with it. So this person is average, their basics is a 4. So I don't remember if we said what this person's starting state was, but remember I asked you guys that in the beginning, you want to rate your starting state, right? To rate, you know, how you feel like you're showing up in the world, business and personal, past 6 to 12 months, right? So that was some sort of number. Let's say for this person, the number was 3.5, right? They're showing up at a 3.5. And probably what you might notice with your numbers is that when you added these all up and divide by 8, that whatever number you got, this person was 4, is usually very, very similar to that original number you picked of your overall number, which for this person, let's say was 3.5. I think we might have said 3.5, right? So what does that mean? Why are those numbers so similar, right? What it means is that all of these things, these basics, are highly, highly correlated, related, right, to how we show up in the world. So if this person's eating, sleeping, working out, clean home, clean car, grooming and self-presentation, body language is all of these numbers, and this is what they rated themselves, and this is a difference of 0.5, right? 3.5 to 4. It's a difference of 0.5. Means those numbers are really close, right? So it means how this person is showing, how this person is doing on their basics, and how they're showing up in the world overall are very related, right? And so it would sort of, we could stand to reason or infer or assume that if we improved these, we could probably improve that. Let's keep moving, and then we're gonna go into a little more detail so you have homework and you know how to start fixing all this stuff. But this is step 1, right? This is us. Here's this person. Their state is a 3.5. We did all their basics. Averages out to a 4. Was super close to what their overall was, right? Which means that these basics and how we show up in the world really matter. And now we're going to go into some other things, because you could, let's say that all of your basics were 10, right? 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, everything 10. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're showing up in the world exactly the way you want to, right? Maybe you're still not. That's still 100% possible. And so we're going to look at what other things we need to be able to show up fully, okay? I think another thing too, guys, with each of these categories is you can see a 10 as a base 10, right? For my perfectionist people, they say, oh, but you know, I can't rate myself a 10 because 10 is perfect and I could always be better and I'm not better. It's like, okay, because of those people, and I'm sort of that way to be honest, but because of those people, I had to come up with the idea of base 10. So if you rated yourself a 10 in eating, it doesn't mean that your eating couldn't possibly be better in any way. It just means base 10. It means you're doing an extremely good job. There's always like infinite levels of how we could be doing better, right? So take a screenshot of this if you want to, if you need to. Write out, make sure you have all of your numbers for yourself, or if you haven't been following along, you can always come back to it, but take a screenshot because I'm going to delete it right now. All right, so we've got our basics, but there's a couple more things that we're going to need, some more tools in our tool belt to be able to make sure that we can show up at a 10, right? Basics, excellent start, right? Be faithful in the small things, we'll be given more things, but we have a couple more things. Once again, there's us, model material, looking beautiful as always. All right, so when I first started doing this with my clients, they would come back to me and you know, every single week I would ask them, you know, what was your state on a scale of 1 to 10? And I do that the first 30 days with my clients now. And then after that, they have no choice but to be at a 10 because they have all the information they need. So I don't really allow anything after those 30 days. I stop asking them. They just know that's how it has to be. And we'll go into that a little bit more, but basically we can either show up at a 10 and have a shot at the life we want, or we could not and be guaranteed to not have it. And life is a game of alternatives, and those are the two options, so we really don't have a choice. Sometimes people say, oh, well, Justin, how do I motivate myself to do all these things? And I tell them, well, because you're guaranteed to fail if you don't. If you don't show up at a 10, if you don't show up and execute and do what needs to be done, if you don't show up with that level of energy, you are guaranteed to not have the life you want. Period, end of discussion, not possible. At least nowhere near what it could have been or what you really wanted it to be. Now, you might be thinking, oh, Justin, well, are you so perfect and is your life so perfect? No, my life's not so perfect, right? I'm a work in progress, you know, just like everybody. But this is important and we absolutely have to have this piece, right? So there's us. My clients would come back to me and they'd say things. I'd ask them, what was your state on a scale of 1 to 10? And they would say, oh, like I would say like a 7. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, why 7? You know, why not a 10? You know, what was it that stood between you and 10, the 7 and the 10? What was the difference? Why did that happen? And they would say something like, well, you know, there was this thing that happened, you know, at work, and then there was this other thing that happened, you know, with this person, and there was also this one other thing, you know, that transpired, and because of those things, kind of my state was a little off, and I rate myself a 7, right? And so I realized that the commonality of all those things that that person or that those people were saying is that those were all circumstances, right? So guys, what most people do is they can only show up in the world at a 10 if all of the circumstances are good, right? And that's normal. You know, most people think that. But the problem is that so often in life, our circumstances are not going to be good, right? There's almost always there's going to be bad circumstances. There's always going to be things that are off. There's always going to be things that we don't want them to be that way that could throw us, right? But if we can only show up when all of our circumstances are good, if we can only be at a 10 when all the circumstances are good, then it's not going to happen very often, right? It's going to be sort of the exception instead of the rule. Like maybe sometimes we get lucky and all of our stars align and, you know, we're able to show up at a 10 because our circumstances are perfect. But guys, you know, that's very problematic for all the other time in our lives, which is other 95+%, right? Excuse me. So I like to draw this as a picture, and I had this as a rule. So the rule is your state, and you're gonna write this out. I'm gonna write this for you too, but I'll just say it first. State is not contingent on circumstance. State is not contingent on circumstance. okay? You can kind of read that, hopefully. State is not contingent on circumstance. What does that mean? It means I do not give a shit what all of the circumstances is that we've got going on. We have to show up regardless. We say, Justin, well, how can we do that? Why? That's not possible. It's like, yeah, it is. The only other choice we have is to not show up unless all of our circumstances are perfect, and that's almost never gonna happen. So we either show up or we don't. And if we're gonna wanna go for the life we want, despite a reality that consists of lots of less than ideal circumstances the vast majority of the time, then we're gonna need to learn how to do that, right? So here's a little picture to help you with this. Let's say this is you, and all of those little circles are all these different circumstances in your life, right? All these different things that you have going on, and maybe many of them are very tricky circumstances that you don't like, but you want to be able to still show up with all of yourself and execute, because that's the only way we're even going to have a chance at moving towards what we want. So what do we do about that? Bam. State is not contingent on circumstance. It means you can see this in your head just like that. You X them all out. They have nothing to do with you. You show up regardless. Okay? Important. So I would tell my clients that, and I made up that rule because I was like, okay, these basics aren't enough. I have to figure out a way to get them here. How do I do that? And so this was one of the ways that I did that. And that was helping them, and that was good. And so let's say the same hypothetical client, right? They come back the next day and say, okay, cool. What was your state like on a scale of 1 to 10? And they would say, oh, well, I would say it got better. I would say this time like an 8. I'm like, okay, cool. Why wasn't it a 10, right? What was that gap? Where did that come from? Why are we not there? And they would say something like, well, this one day I was kind of feeling a little anxious, and this other day I was feeling kind of down. And just a little bit off some of the days, and so I kind of affected my state of how I show up. So I would say like an 8 instead of a 10. It's like, okay. And I heard people saying these things a lot, and I noticed that this other category of thing that people were saying, if it wasn't a circumstance, it was a feeling. So there was all these feelings that they were feeling, and because of those feelings, they were not able to show up. But guys, this is the same problem that the circumstance problem is, right? Which is, very rarely in life are all of our stars going to align and all of our feelings are going to be good, right? And all our feelings are perfect. And if we can only show up when that happens, it's just not going to happen very often. It's just not going to be possible to move towards what we want, the way in which we want, and the speed in which we want. Maybe you'll get there in like 500 years, right? But as of now, in the recording of this video, we don't live that long yet. Maybe when they put the little chip in our brain, that will start happening. But for now, we don't live 500 years, right? So if we want to even have a chance of getting where we want to go, or at the life we see in our head that we hope to have, right? Or maybe you can't even see that in your head, but there's something, even though you don't know what it is yet, that maybe you want. We have to learn to show up regardless of how we feel, right? And I say, well, Justin, how can we do that? How can I motivate myself to do that? Well, what is your alternative? Yeah, you could just not do it. It's just you're guaranteed to fail. Me too, by the way. I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I'm guaranteed to fail too if I don't do that. We are all guaranteed to fail if we cannot show up in the world and execute and move towards things we want with that energy and focus and grounded and going out there and doing it, right? So I'm gonna write this out for you, and you guys can write this too. State is not contingent on how you feel. Whoops. I started writing an S and a T at the same time. It's kind of funny. All right. State is not contingent on how you feel. Let's do another drawing to show this. There's you, there's me, there's us, right? Human beings. And we've got all these feelings, right? We've got all of these different feelings that are going on, and maybe many of them are tricky feelings or negative feelings or uncomfortable feelings or whatever, right? But if we can only show up when all of those are perfect, probably not going to happen very often, at least not as often as we want. So what do? We apply our rule, right? State is not contingent on how you feel, okay? Bam. See, so now you're showing up better, right? And the good thing about this is that this gives us control, right? This life can feel so out of our control, and there's so many moving variables and dynamics and things that make it tricky that it's like, well, how could I possibly always show up? It's like, well, this is the way, right? Not that this is perfect, but we're covering all the bases of why we don't show up. At least the basics of it. I mean, there's other things too, but we're covering the basics of this so that we can understand how to show up in the world and have some energy and go towards the things we want. So if our state is not contingent on circumstances, it means whatever is going on around us, that's okay. X, we're gonna show up anyway. We got this. Feelings means we've got all these feelings going on, it's okay, we can show up regardless. Now, state is not just how you feel, right? The reason I say that is because if it's just how you feel, we're sort of in trouble because we're sort of vulnerable to a lot of tricky feelings. State is just, are you showing up with all of yourself to execute in the moment, business and personal, across all categories of your life, the vast majority of the time, and when you notice yourself drifting, that you get yourself back there, right? That's what this is about. And so if we can show up regardless of circumstances, regardless of feelings, now we're putting control in our own court, the ball in our own court, right? We have a lot more say over how our life goes and a lot more ability to go out there and take action on things, right? And so had these rules, and so my people were getting a lot better, right? They were learning, but I could tell there was still sort of something missing. I would ask, let's say that same client, they come back the next week and I say, hey, how is your state on a scale of 1 to 10? They say, well, I would say like a 9. I'm like, okay, cool. Why wasn't it a 10? And they would say, well, there were times where like my mind would wander this way or that way or over here, and I would get sort of stuck in my head and get kind of off my state. And, for that reason, those things were happening. For that reason, I put myself at a 9 out of 10. I'm like, okay, I need still something else. I got to give them some other tool so that they can get themselves back there, so they can sort of get to that point, right? And so I created this idea. Well, I guess maybe, I don't know, everybody has their own ways of looking at all these things. So we're all building on ideas that we've heard in the past, I suppose, but I created this idea of mental repetitions. Right? Mental repetitions. So let's explain this with a drawing. Let's say this is you, or this was my client, or this is me, or whatever, and he said, or she said, that many times, or maybe not many times throughout the day, but I can tell you many times throughout the day it's gonna happen to you, it happens to me too. The human being experience, let's say this is us on our center, let's say that's 10. It's like our thoughts are always going all over the place, right? We're going off that way, we're going off, that way and all over the place. And it's very easy to get off our center, for our thoughts to wander and to be stuck in our head, right? So that's normal for me too, right? So we have to have some way of dealing with that. So I have this idea of mental repetitions. And what I mean by that is, if this is your center, what I tell my clients, and for you guys too, is you want to start to be aware of your state throughout the week or the couple weeks that it takes you to learn how to do this. Or if you end up reaching out and we work together, then I would tell you over the week is what I tell my clients. I meet with them once a week. So I tell them over the week, start being aware of your state on a scale of 1 to 10. How are you doing? Are you doing well? Are you not? Like, how is your state fluctuating? Like, how are you doing with this, right? Because when we're aware of it, it's easier to improve it versus like, I have no clue, right? That's more of a problem. So you want to be aware of your state, and then when you notice it drifting, you do this mental repetition. So what I mean by that is, let's say I'm on my center, but then I start thinking about something else, right? And I'm stuck in my head out here somewhere, just for the sake of simplicity, right? So by mental repetition, I mean you sort of bring yourself back here. And the reason I say that, mental repetition, it's almost like a push-up or a sit-up, or it's like physically uncomfortable. Like it's hard, it requires you to exert some energy. It's gonna feel a little uncomfortable. In the beginning, like anything that you do is when it's gonna feel the most uncomfortable. So that's when it's gonna be the hardest. And it almost is gonna feel a little bit like moving through molasses or like quicksand or something where you're like needing to pull through. It's like it's like that same feeling, almost like the push-up. Well, hopefully you don't feel that way with one push-up, but you know, if you do, that's okay. But it's that feeling of exerting some effort and it's sort of uncomfortable and you're bringing yourself back. And so many times a day you're going to experience this, where your thoughts are going off all over the place and you know you're not too happy about that. And a lot of those places that your thoughts go off to might be negative, because you know our brains are designed to keep us alive, and so we're always looking for what's wrong so that we can get away from it, right? So it's a survival mechanism, but sometimes it makes our quality of life not so good or anxious or whatever. So you want to notice when your thoughts are doing that, and when you notice that your thoughts are like, oh, out here, just bring yourself back. And your thoughts go out this way, bring yourself back. Thoughts go this way. And you're learning to just kind of keep bringing yourself back. And just like any exercise, push-ups, whatever it is, as you start to do this many times a day, that you're sort of aware of that happening and bringing yourself back consciously and sort of just doing that mental, I guess, exertion, those mental repetitions, it's gonna get easier, it's gonna get more natural, it's gonna not require as much effort for you to do. And so the more you can be aware of your state and notice when that's happening and bring yourself back, then that's very powerful. And once I taught that to my clients, then they had everything, right? So there's your basics. We got to be faithful in the small things, but then we have these rules. So there's our basics, there's circumstances, there's feelings, and then there's us getting stuck in our head going all over the place. But now we can account for all those things, right? So basics, like I said, state's not contingent on circumstance, that X's out all those things. State's not contingent on how you feel, that X's out all those things. And if we can be aware of our state and do these mental repetitions to bring ourselves back, all of a sudden, we're doing all right, right? So I'm gonna erase this if you need to take a screenshot. Now's your time. All right, so now that we have all that, let's get into some homework, and then there's one final thing that I will share after that, and then we're gonna start to wrap things up here, okay? So you've got awareness of your state, right? So throughout the week or these next couple weeks that you're teaching yourself this, you can teach yourself this for sure within the 3 or 4 weeks. So within 30 days, you know, today's, you know, May, whatever, 15th, or I think 16th or 17th, whatever day today is, you know, maybe you have a goal by June 17th. Like I live in a peak state, or I live at a 10 by June 17th, 2023, right? That would be like 1 month of when I'm recording this, something like that. So first you're gonna wanna practice awareness of your state, right? Throughout the day, how am I doing right now on a scale of 1 to 10? How am I doing? Where's my state at, right? The more you know where you're doing, the more you can kind of have control and tweak it. You got your basics. Eating, sleeping, okay, so we've got all our basics. Eating, sleeping, working out, clean home, clean car, grooming and self-presentation, body language. So whatever your numbers were for these guys, if I was working with you one-on-one, or what I do with my clients, is we're looking for incremental improvement in each of these areas, in an amount that of course moves us as fast as we can possibly handle, but is also something that we know we can do. So if someone is, you know, eating McDonald's 5 times a day, I'm not gonna tell them like, okay, your homework is this week, no McDonald's, because they'll be like, fuck that, like that's not gonna be possible, right? And so I don't give them a homework like that. I give them something that is incrementally better. And as we start to stack a couple weeks of incrementally better, all of a sudden some good things are happening, right? And this is sort of how human beings best improve, is incrementally. Of course, we want to take the biggest incremental steps we can, but you know, especially when you're first learning something new, maybe you've got a lot of negative momentum in your life, you want to take the little wins. Take the little wins, take things you know you can handle, you stack them, stack them, stack them, stack them, start to get some positive momentum, things get better, okay? So let's say eating. Let's say, you know, if your eating was, I don't remember our exact numbers, whatever it is for you, I'm just giving an example. Let's say if your eating was a 3, then, you know, what does a 3.5 look like? Or what does a 4 look like? That number is so low, I would go somewhere like that, 3.5 or 4. So let's say the person was like, well, you know, I eat fast food 1 meal per day. Then maybe I would tell them, okay, well, 1 time this week, don't eat fast food, right? So go for 6 out of 7, right? Instead of 7 out of 7. Or if they're like, you know, I drink 3 cans of Coke a day, that's a lot, right? That's a big deal. So maybe I'd tell them, okay, one of those days, could you drink 2 cans of Coke? And that might sound really small and silly and stupid. You might be like, well, Justin, why are you giving people such small things? Like, you know, they can do more than that. It's like, well, you'd be surprised, you know, when we have a lot of momentum going a certain way that is not the way we want it to go. In the beginning, when we're the most stuck, we want to ask very, very small things of ourselves, just so we can go from like negative momentum to something in the right direction. And it's actually pretty surprising when you start to stack a couple of those in a row, how quickly it can start to turn to positive momentum. And then of course we can ask more, and of course we can go to, you know, higher goals than that. But in the beginning, it's very helpful for human beings, especially the more stuck we are, to really be incremental. And really, we're always being incremental at whatever level we can handle. But a lot of times people are asking way too much of themselves, and they're like, oh, never mind, I can't do that, and they give up. And some of that is a little bit of a pride thing, you know? Some of it is like we have to have the humility to sometimes set smaller goals, because sometimes that can actually get us to where we want to go faster than setting something giant and being like, nope, no way, I can't do that, right? So if this person's eating was a 3, maybe I'd give them something to get them a 3.5 or 4. Those are a couple examples. Say their sleep is a 5. Again, I don't remember what I said before. Whatever your sleep is, then, you know, if you were like, hey, Justin, I'm sleeping, you know, 8 hours a night, but only 2 nights a week, you know, or 3 nights a week, and the other couple are not as good, be like, okay, well, could you get 8 hours 4 nights a week this week? And I would do that. And so you can imagine over 30 days, if we're meeting every week and each week we do something a little incrementally better, these really do start to change, and the whole number, the overall state does start to change. And people do learn to do this within 30 days. So it might sound slow, but you know, if you think about it, if you can learn to manage your state out of 10 within 30 days and you have that the rest of your life, I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that that could be worth millions of dollars to you in your business life alone, or at least hundreds of thousands. And even if you make very little, still hundreds of thousands. And then there's your personal life, and our personal life is just as valuable as our business life, because we have business or career or jobs so that we can have personal life, right? So you get that same value on your personal life side. So this matters, it's important, it sounds slow, but to learn how to do this in 30 days is still a lot, right? Working out. 3, I don't remember what the one was before. But let's say for you, if the person was a 3, then maybe they're working out like 2 times a week, or no, that would be too high. Maybe once a week or less. I don't know. I'm just throwing out numbers. But let's say if you're going to the gym once a week, then maybe you try to go for 2 times this week. You know, so you guys get the idea of just something that's incrementally better. So you can imagine if you're going once a week and we do this over 30 days, twice a week. So once a week to 2 to 3 to 4, within 30 days, you're going 4 times a week. That's pretty decent, right? So that would be a pretty significant change, and that would really help you with your overall numbers of your state, right? So whatever is incrementally more for you, and you're gonna wanna ramp up these increments each week, right? So if you choose, you know, to go to the gym twice instead of once, and then 3 times instead of twice, and then 4 times instead of 3, and see if you can do it. you know? And if you're asking something that is too much of yourself, then ask a little bit less. You know, maybe you're trying to go to the gym for an hour and you're like, fuck, this is hard, right? Maybe go for 20 minutes, right? Something that you know you can handle. Clean home. So each of these, you guys get the idea. So really for each of these, you're looking for something that's incrementally better. Just a little bit incrementally better. So whatever your numbers are, if it's a 5, okay, what would a 6 be? Okay, well a 6 would be if I did blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, cool. This week, you're gonna do that. And you want to do that for each of these different things. So you wanna give yourself a specific assignment for each of these things, little bit further along than you are now, that if you did that thing, you could rate yourself that higher number, whether it's a 0.5 more or 6 more. The lower your numbers are, if you have something that's like a 1, you're only asking like a 1.5. Ask something really small. If you're already like an 8 or 7 or 6, like you got a little more momentum, maybe you can ask another number or 2. But ask something of yourself that you know you could do. That sounds, you're like, man, that's like a joke. Like that's so easy that I know for sure I could do that. That's what we're going for, because we're just going for whatever momentum we can take. And when we've got it, cool, we'll build more, okay? So awareness of your state, basics. State is not contingent on circumstance. State is not contingent on how you feel. And then mental repetitions, right? So we've got all that. And I want to share one final thing with you guys that is going to help you, because, you know, something Tony Robbins talks about is he says that, you know, our lives change when we raise our standards. He says, as simple as it is, you know, this is what changes people's lives, is you raise your standards. And that makes sense, right? And standards are basically how our life has to go. So if we raise the line of how our life has to go, then yes, things will change. But, you know, sort of an interesting question is like, okay, well, if our lives change when our standards change, you know, how do you raise your standards? Like, how do you make that decision? How do you do that, right? How do you make the decision to be at a 10? You know, you might be like, how do I make that decision, right? People don't really tell us. And so I want to briefly go over that in this video because it is related to this. This is another very valuable thing for you guys. And I call this the anatomy of a decision. So we're just going to erase these. If you need to take a screenshot of anything, all right, cool. So if we know that when we raise our standards, that's when our lives get better, and we know that comes from a decision, then the question is, how do we make a decision? And that's what we're going to talk about right now, the anatomy of a decision. So you guys can write this down, the anatomy of a decision. All right, anatomy of a decision, cool. So there are 3 pieces. There's sort of like levers, like levers that we can pull. And when we pull those, when we play with those pieces, then we're able to get ourselves to make a decision. And by the way, this is how you persuade other people to do things as well. This is how you get yourself to do stuff. This is how you get others to do stuff. If you ever wondered, this is sort of a basic explanation of how you do that. How do you get yourself to do things, right? And there's sort of 3 pieces to this. So I'm gonna write these out. The first is future benefit, right? So future benefit means, what are all the good things that are gonna happen in the future if you learn to show up at a 10, right? Future benefit, pretty straightforward. So the first thing we wanna do, max out future benefit. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, we have to have some sort of picture in our minds of something that really excites us. Something that is big enough that it excites us, that is clear enough that our mind can process and see and sort of click and link onto. And the more we have something in our head that we can see, that we feel we have to have, the easier it's gonna be to get ourselves to show up at a 10, because we're like, well, I have to have that. That excites me so much, right? Now, how amazing would that be? So future benefit. The more we can have a future that excites us, that we can see, we wanna max out this category, have the most exciting, most amazing future in our head that we possibly can, and that's gonna help us to show up at a 10, right? So that's the first of the 3 pieces. The second A second that says current dissatisfaction. Current dissatisfaction. We want to max out this category. This is the second lever that we play with. Now, this category is the most important. So we talked about human beings, our brains are wired to keep us alive, right? We're looking for things that could be potential threats, and we notice those and we get away from those so that we can stay alive and mate, and our genes are passed down, right? Those are sort of some of the basics. So it's completely widely agreed, everybody agrees, that dissatisfaction in getting yourself or others to do things is infinitely more powerful than future benefit. However, they are related. So I'll explain what I mean by each of those things. Current dissatisfaction. First, what do I mean by current dissatisfaction? What I mean is that you have to max out the level of pain that you're in. You have to become so uncomfortable with your current situation that you just can't stand it any longer. Like fire, like you need to hop out of fire. Like, I cannot do this, screw this, I'm out of here, bam. And so the way I say that they're related is because the more you have a future benefit, the more you can see something in your head that really, really excites you, the more that will help with the current dissatisfaction too, because you'll see that and you'll be like, shit, I can't be here anymore. If you want what's up here and you're down here and you're looking up here, what you have to have, and you're down here, you get very uncomfortable down here. You're like, shit, I gotta get up here. I can't be down here anymore. It's like hopping out of fire. So they play on each other. You have to have both. This helps this to work, right? So you need to be excited as possible about a future that's big and clear that you can see. And you need to become very uncomfortable with the idea of never having this, of always staying where you are, of never going any further. The more that freaks you out, the more you're gonna be able to get yourself to show up at a 10, because you're like, man, I can't be here anymore. I have to learn to manage my state, or I'm never gonna get this, and I have to have this. So those are the first two levers. There's one more. This one's a little different. The third lever is time. So this is stuff that I have in other videos, but guys, the biggest mistake that human beings make, in my opinion, obviously, is that we think we have time. We assume we have time, we can just get to stuff later, and we calculate on averages. So if you're 20 years old or 30 years old or whatever, and you think you've got till 80, you've got 50 or 60 years or whatever, and you start calculating out your life. For one, you're still gonna waste that time anyway, even if God willing you have it. For two, you might not have the time you think. But anyway, this is the big mistake people make. This is why they don't have that much current dissatisfaction, because they think, oh, I can do it later. I'm not that dissatisfied. And they don't have that much future benefit. It's like, oh, I can figure out my future benefit later, right? That's what they do. It's true. So time, we want to minimize time. So let's say we know exactly what we want. It's big enough. It's exciting enough. We're like, yes, I have to freaking have this. Period. End of discussion. Maximizing future benefit. You got to know what that is for you. That's going to be a topic of another video, but I'm explaining this to you so that you have an idea of what it takes to make that decision of getting yourself to a 10. Dissatisfaction. Super uncomfortable, cannot stay where you are any longer, have to be up here, will not stay down here any longer. And then time. So whenever we condense time, it makes people want to do things more, including ourselves. So if you condense time, it's kind of like saying, let's say that you think you've got 60 or 50 or 40 years to live, and I told you, like, listen, that may or may not be true, but what if you had like 30 or 40 weeks? Like, how would you be playing your cards differently? And who knows, that might sound like a, sad example, like, oh, Justin, I don't have that time. Well, there's lots of people who say they don't have that time and then they die, right? So it's like, this happens. Like, typically people don't have the time that they think. Even if they lead a good long life, it still goes, right? So no matter how many years you have, you don't have the time you think. But when we can understand and play with this variable, this lever of time, and minimize time, dissatisfaction goes through the roof. So let's say you think you've got 50 years, right? But then for whatever reason, something happens and you go to a doctor, and let's just say that doctor knows everything, which of course none of them do, but let's say there was one, and you go to a doctor and they're like, listen, I have some bad news for you. You got 50 weeks. So what is that? Maybe around a year or so, something like that. So all of a sudden, time is condensed. Dissatisfaction goes up of like, well, shit, I want what's up here. I'm down here. I gotta get up there. And now instead of 50 years, I've got 50 weeks to go from this place I don't want to be to up here. And I said that I have to get up here and that it has to happen or I'll be miserable. And then you start feeling more and more and more miserable here. And then you're like, doom, and you move faster, right? So again, people say, you know, how can I get myself to live at a 10? How can I get myself to make that decision? We're talking here about the anatomy of a decision, right? So this is sort of how you make that decision and force yourself. You work on knowing your future benefit and max that out as much as you can, as big and clear and exciting as you can possibly get it. You start to become highly uncomfortable with the idea that you could never have that. And then you understand that you might not, very likely are not, playing with the time that you hope to have or think you have, or however you want to say that. And you want to condense that time. So when you do all that, guys, it's going to help you to show up at a 10. I'm gonna erase all this, so if you guys want to take one last screenshot on that, you could take that now. All right, guys, so that's it. That's how you learn to live in a peak state. So let's say you go from here. Remember, your state is a 3. Your results are probably going to be a 3. Or close to it, right? Or highly correlated to it, meaning, you know, your relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife or girls or guys that you're dating are gonna be correlated to a 3. You know, health, fitness, business, how your meetings go, how your prospecting or sales go, how you are with your employees, how you are with your managers, how you are with your teachers, how you are with your children, how you are with your friendships, how you are with your passions and things you love. It's all gonna be correlated with this. And as you can imagine, if you can learn to manage your state, it doesn't guarantee your results, guys. Of course, there's lots of things that impact the results we get in the world, but this is a big one. So go over everything, do the homework. You know, if you guys are doing all this on your own, give yourself those incremental goals each week in each of those categories. Work on everything that we talked about. And guys, no matter who you are, what your background, age, you know, what it is that you're looking for, you know, we are somewhere and we want to go somewhere in our lives. And there are things that will make that difficult. And if we have energy, we can get there. And if we don't, it's going to be difficult / next to impossible. So that's why state matters. It matters for your business and career life. It matters for your personal life. It matters no matter where you are in life. It matters for every single category of your life. And when you can get that right, every category is going to improve. And now you're going to be showing up in the world with energy. And when we have energy, we are more able to continue and go towards the things we want. Again, there's lots of other stuff we can go over in other videos to come. But no matter where you're at, this is where you start. This is being faithful in the small things. This is just being faithful to those basics. And so you're coming at life from a place of strength, right? So guys, I hope that this was helpful. I really enjoyed sharing this with you guys. It's the first time that I've shared all this in this way, just sort of for free with everybody out in the video, which I'm very excited for. Please share this video, you know, share it with whoever you think it might speak to. And yeah, guys, that's all for this video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.